Okay, I am having a wonderful chat with pianist Lindsay Garritson. We're going to talk about your 2019 independently released CD. I have that correct. And what courage, bravissima, uh, and what a powerful statement you have made. Your 2019 independent CD release, Aphorisms, the piano music of Carl Vine. Hello, everybody out there, pianists, everybody, right, get your, notepads and pencils. I hope I'm not the last person to be absolutely blown away by this Australian composer, Carl Vine. I saw in reading his biography, some of you know I'm too old now, but I once upon a time had a career as a conductor. I see he composed 8 symphonies. He's one of Australia's great composers, and I thought maybe I kind of sort of had a handle on Australian, New Zealand music and orchestral composers. Nope, no idea about this man, Carl Vine. In this case, all piano music, but pithy ain't the word, as in aphorism. It's more like genius. I mean, genius. We're going to, on this CD, the Piano Sonata Number 4, world premiere from 2019. Thank you very much. Huge, massive, incredible, stunning, magical. It's amazing. The Anne Landa Preludes, 12 Preludes from 2006. And just as I thought, oh, okay, fine, 12 little preludes, and they have titles, and it's all going to be so charming. The first prelude, he took me on a journey that lasted, it seemed like 4 weeks. I mean, this is stunning, stunning compositional material. That's what I'm getting at. The Sonata Number 1, Piano Sonata Number 1 from 1990. I haven't mentioned that yet. That apparently is pretty well known and more often performed. A huge, glorious beast of a piece. I have a funny feeling. 5 bagatelles we're going to talk about from 1994, and then the 2011 Toccatissimo, and that's like saying, oh, it's no big, it's just a little hurricanissimo. I mean, it's like huge. The energy, the structure, the movement. But first, let's just spend a minute and have a look at Lindsay Garritson. Okay, you're based in Florida now, yeah?
That's correct. I'm in Stewart.
Stewart, Florida, which is part of the greater Miami area or something, kind of?
Closer to West Palm Beach.
West Palm Beach, okay. You have degrees from Principia College. Where is that?
Principia is in southern Illinois. It's actually more of the St. Louis area. It's right across the Mississippi River. Very small liberal arts school that my mom taught at, actually. She was a professor of music for many years.
Ah, when it's in the family, I want to go out and slit my wrists because my family were not exactly we're not happy. They wanted me to be a dentist. So what can I say? Uh, anyway,
Okay.
the piano sonata number 4, as I said, the Anlanda Preludes, 12 lovely preludes. Piano sonata number 1 we're going to talk about, and this Toccatissimo. But you got your master's degree from Yale, and I made a little bit of fun, but it shows in what I heard, okay? And what it is, I think, I don't think I'm not putting you on the spot or anything, but when people go into an institution like Yale School of Music, there is no way they cannot be permanently altered for the better. And what I'm trying to say by that is the young people that I've worked with that have gone to Yale, they come out raging intellectuals as well as musicians. And that's what I have before my eyes and ears with aphorisms. And what I mean about intellectualism is when that school teaches you how to look deep, how to understand subtext, how to move through masses of notes intelligently, and so on. I hope my check will be arriving soon from Yale. Anyway, and then you got your doctorate recently, I guess, huh?
I did. I got it at the end of May this past year at the University of Miami in piano performance.
Wow! And had the plague already hit the campus? Did you have to do anything special? As in, was it remote? Your
Yeah, well, actually, I was lucky because this past year I was a part-time student because I finished all my coursework the previous year. So all I had to do this past spring for school was just write my essay. So I was already kind of remote
I see.
anyway. So in that regard, it didn't actually affect me.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And of course, competition, international competitions. You're a member of the Bergonzi Piano Trio, or is that done or continuing? How's that?
To be announced. Well, as you know, with COVID, most performances have been either canceled or postponed. So we were supposed to do many concerts this past summer that didn't happen. So hopefully we'll have some more things happening maybe in the winter of next year. It just depends on,
Of next
on
year, not this year, the winter of next year.
well, of this season.
I see.
That's what yeah.
Well, as we all know, we are all there. That's the only consolation I have for me and you is that we're all there, and um, it's rough. It's really rough, and I hope we'll I'm sure we'll all manage through. But it's just you have to just hunker down and wait till the storm passes in a way
Right.
in the case of this virus. So good. Well, I'm glad you're ready to go. So are
Yep.
we all when this nightmare is over. I want to talk a little bit about Australian pianist and composer, which may help us get to another question I have in mind about his writing for piano. It sounds incredible to me. We'll talk about it in a bit. But Australian pianist composer Carl Vine, born in 1954, one of Australia's best known, I'm so ashamed, and often performed composers. Huge orchestral catalog. That's what made my jaw drop when I saw those eight symphonies. I thought, where have I been? How come? What?
Yeah.
Nothing. Not not even a solicitation about it back in the day when I was an orchestra conductor.
Uh-huh.
12 concertos. I mean, his piano music is performed frequently in Australia and around the world, of course. But I hope we're going to get some faculty to have a look at this man. I hope I'm not the only one to be so taken by this composer. Just
You're not.
okay, good. 60 CDs. It goes on and on. So here's this huge talent, and may I congratulate you for you don't. I know you've put out an earlier CD, kind of the standard rep, maybe
Right.
kind of audition, if you will, context, which is what these are essentially about in the profession. But then I don't know what got into you, and what did get into you? When did you
Oh,
run into Fine? When did you encounter this composer?
yeah. So being a pianist, I would say on the international concert scene, people who are most likely to know Carl Vine's music are pianists, uh, particularly because of his first piano sonata from 1990. A lot of pianists play that in big competitions, for instance. So I would say most pianists I come across, they know Carl Vine. So I had probably first heard his music maybe 15 years ago, something like that. But I actually didn't learn a piece of his until 2016. And the reason I learned a piece, which was called Toccatissimo, which is on the CD, that was for a competition I did in Sydney, the Sydney International Piano Competition, which Carl Vine was actually part of the jury.
That
And
was
so,
that was nervy. That was
yeah,
nervy.
well, so actually, one of the requirements for the competition was you had to play a composer who's Australian.
Okay.
So most people chose Carl Vine because he's definitely the most well-known, I would say, composer out of Australia today. Yeah, so he was on the jury, and so that was definitely nerve-wracking to know the composer's there. But luckily, he was very supportive of my playing, and we kept a little bit of a correspondence after that point. But I decided after learning this piece Toccatissimo that I really wanted to learn more of his music. So I did that. I learned the first sonata, which is on the CD, and then everything else that's on the CD. And so fast forward to, let's see, 2018, I think the beginning of 2018, I contacted Mr. Vine and I asked, if he would at all be open to writing a sonata for me, if he had time, if he'd be interested in it. Um,
That's
you know,
nervy.
well, but the thing is, he always works with commissions,
Yeah.
so I knew that okay, I don't know, what the details are, but very fortunately, I was able to make everything work. He
Wonderful.
he told me that I caught him at exactly the right time because
Nice.
he's always composing pieces. So he had time during the year of 2018 and 19. He delivered the fourth piano sonata to me in June of 2019.
And this will be on your resume for the rest of your career
That's
as
right.
a
And I wrote about the piece for my doctoral essay. So yeah,
it's
it's a
in the
great.
bag. It's in the bag. It's yours. Well, all I can say is again, the fourth sonata, this world premiere that you asked him to compose and found the wherewithal to make happen from 2019 is an absolute, as we have said, talked a little bit, a masterpiece. And it's it's not an overdone word. When something every single moment of its existence is thrilling and stunning, it's a masterpiece. Okay, and then when it falls, when music falls together, this is the thing I don't know, I can't explain it, but when stuff falls together properly, you've got
Mhm.
yourself a masterpiece. All of this programming on the CD is so, but that fourth sonata is just stunning. We're going to talk a little more detail about these works, but let's see. Okay, so we kind of covered Carl Vine, we covered Lindsay Garritson a little bit, but I want to know four at the age of four, what happened? Somebody kidnapped you and threw you in front of a piano. What happened? Tell me the story.
Put me on stage. Yeah. So actually, I come from a very musical family. Both my parents are professional musicians,
Wonderful.
and I'm the youngest of four. So my brother used to play violin, and my two older sisters are both professional musicians. One of them is a pianist, and the other is a cellist. So, as you can probably imagine where I'm going with this, we perform together as a family. And actually, I started on the violin when I
Good.
was, I believe, two and a half, and then I don't remember that so
I
well,
don't.
but
I don't either. So apparently it didn't happen for me. Go ahead.
right. And then I started piano a couple years later,
Yeah.
and I still play violin to this day, but obviously piano is my main my main instrument at this point. But I started performing with my family when I was four, so first on violin and then adding piano with them, and performed across the country from a young age, and then I've also performed in.
Wow.
But yeah, I started at a very early age because my family is very musical.
How fortunate also because you're just naturalness is almost built into your circumstance. You were just a natural
Right.
musician with professional musicians as your parents to guide you correctly.
Hmm.
And what I want to know is what's with the violin? Like Sherlock Holmes, once in a while when you're
Ah,
meditating, you take it out, or what? Or do you actually sit down and play kind of sort of regularly? I mean, how does one find the time?
that's a very good question. So I usually try to practice every day if I can, even if it's just a little bit of time, because I just love the instrument. I love.
Now, are we talking piano or violin?
I'm talking violin right now.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. You love the instrument. Go ahead. That's
Yeah,
one of two that you love, apparently.
right, right. So I still make time for violin every day if I can, especially during COVID. I have a little bit more time,
Hmm.
um,
Nice.
flexibility. So yes, with violin, I try to keep it up. Um, I perform here and there, but piano is, like I said, my main instrument. So
Yeah.
my
I
focus.
think it's okay to say the piano is your main instrument, all right, because this, again, it's still really, I mean, continually, year after year after year, blows my brains out about what this thing is when people prepare a CD. It has to be perfect, period. Flawless,
Yeah.
period. Everything has to be that way, or you are not at the level that is necessary, if you get my drift, to have the chutzpah to put out a CD. You know what I mean? This
Right.
is stunning pianism, wonderful playing, and as I mentioned about, I'm sure others, not to say nothing of your family, and it's already in place, intuitive uh, help in terms of your guidance of how to make a piece work, how to understand what it works. But with this kind of repertoire, this is, I guess, again, what I'm getting at is the brilliance of your playing, and what I hear is that it's sorted out. There's nothing not in place, and I don't mean in place note for note. I don't mean that. I mean hang on a large. Oh, fire engines going by. Um,
Oh, it's
But what I mean is that everything is not only in place but has sense. Everything has, and as we know, everything must have sensibility. It's not just you know notes
Absolutely.
flying around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to go on, but go ahead, comment on that, would you? I mean, in other words, tell me
Sure.
about some teachers. Tell me about is any,
Yeah.
if any, or is it your, what is it? Where does the intuition that allows you to play 20th century music with such insight and purpose?
Well, going back to the topic of going to Yale, for instance, I think I learned quite a lot during that time in regards to how to look at a score specifically, how to analyze a piece, and that's in part because of my teacher there, very well-known Russian pianist and teacher, Boris Berman. He is an amazing musician, and I feel like he really taught me how to look in depth at a score, no matter what the composer was. So, I mean, I guess I've always felt like I was an intuitive musician, but having both the intuition and knowing how to look at a score are you have to have both.
Exactly. Right.
So when I take a piece of Vine, for instance, I really treat it like any other composer, Beethoven, Chopin, in the way that I analyze it. And also he uses very traditional forms
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And I can definitely see how he's influenced by various composers. So I definitely have things to kind of latch onto when I'm looking at his score. For instance, the Fourth Sonata, obviously nobody had played it before. So I had to make my own conclusions about, things like phrasing, um, how to build the drama, all that kind of thing, from a structural point of view. But I really find Vine's music quite accessible in a way. Like it really makes sense to me, and I found that audiences really warm up to his music very quickly. It's not like, trying to feed the audience something that they just can't really get the first time. I just find like his music is so organic in a way. I don't know, that's one of the things I love about it.
Well,
It's very um, it's very intellectually rich at the same time.
exactly, and also very, very difficult. There's no doubt about what I heard as a lousy pianist. I mean, it's like, let alone being a proficient pianist. But and what I mean by that is you got to have your chops. You don't fool with any of
Absolutely.
this stuff. The chops have got to be there, but also the sensibility. That's what you've just finished talking about, and I've been babbling on about. It's when a composer understands every emotion, really, emotional capacity and faculty of the audience,
Hmm.
really. I mean, how to express an intellectual or emotional idea without pandering. How's that? This
Right.
guy does not do that. This is solid stuff. You don't hear a back text of, oh, I wonder if they'll like this. You know what I mean? That kind
Yeah.
of thing. So it's just pure. It's gorgeous, gorgeous compositional music. Before we dive in a little bit, how does Vines? He's a pianist composer. Apparently, has gigged over his career also as a pianist. How does the writing? It's very difficult. It's very virtuosic. It's stunning and rewarding. It has to be because from
Yeah.
what I heard. But how does it fall under the fingers? Is there anything where you went, ah, I wish he had done something, or does it just make perfect sense? Tell me.
I would say his music is very idiomatic to the instrument. A little bit like, if I had to think of another composer before, like Mendelssohn, maybe. It just
Nice.
feels really good in the hands. At the same time, yes, it's very difficult. You have to practice it a lot, but there's something that's really satisfying just physically, I would say, about playing
Mm,
his music, because at least for me, I always gravitate toward kind of brilliant writing, but not like in a necessarily superficial
mm.
way. But I just love kind of these textures that are really brilliant pianistically, a lot of different effects, which he has, like in the Toccatissimo, for instance. It's just amazing writing. Um, but
And about his idiomatic stuff, is it the Fugato, one of the preludes? it begins and it's like, oh, I'm going down a Bachian trail, and
Yeah,
then starts to twist it
yeah,
and turn it a little bit in very intelligent, wonderful ways. But I mean, his mastery of technique, if you will, is clear.
yeah. You can definitely tell that he is a good pianist himself and knows how to work around the instrument.
Okay, well, I think I've about exhausted my questions, and I'm now looking at the CD, and I want
Okay.
to let's see because you're going to have to talk to me about it about these pieces. But let me throw. I think I kind of like doing this these days. I'm kind of what I do is I put on the CD, I sit down at the keyboard, and it's stream of consciousness.
Oh,
Like, and then later I go and say, did any of that make sense? So let's see if any of it made sense. We're looking at the world premiere, the Sonata Number 4 from 2019, world premiere recording that you have just made. It's the first yummy piece on this CD. I'll just throw a couple things and then like, why don't you uh, tell us how you look at this fourth piano sonata? I love his use of color, and it sounds like almost an excuse for critics to say, "Oh, I love his use of color." But here you go. There are dark shades, and then they're swirling and dark and deep. And this is the introduction in the first section of this one movement sonata. But it's brilliant, brilliant writing. That's what I have. And now things get quite caught up in a sweeping sound and theme a little further on, back to calmer state. I mean, he is somewhat sequential, I guess. I think I hear things over and over again,
yeah.
but he moves us through a whole gamut of moods. Let me just see if I can find any other juicy bits. I heard sort of a Debussy-ish manner sometimes. I mean, in other words, he is a contemporary composer, but we get little hints and pieces, little moments of something. Go ahead, now it's your turn.
Okay. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I would say one of the biggest influences I hear in his piano music is from Debussy and Ravel, especially in his second piano sonata, which I
Mm.
did not record on the CD, but that's particularly kind of influenced by Ravel. And so you hear, I think, a lot of the kind of the registral contrasts that those two composers feature in a lot of their piano music, and just the particular colors that they create with the instrument. I think Vine takes from that
And I like
concept.
his use of sustained pedals. I don't know if that's quite accurately stated by me, the non-pianist, but where the pedal is down so that we can hear quite deliberately the meld and
Right.
of
Yeah.
sounds. It's quite a wonderful technique and color technique. It's quite an impressive color
Right.
technique.
Exactly. There are a lot of layers happening pretty much all throughout the piece. You've usually got some kind of sustained chord in the bass, and then very colorful textures above it that are usually like ostinato pattern, something that's continuous.
Yeah, and also tremendous color. Uh, forgive me, Maestro Vine, but there are almost some Liberace sort of moments. I mean, these sweeping
Yeah.
bravura, arpeggi. Anyway, you know
Uh,
what I mean.
yeah.
But what that really is just gorgeous sweeping color. The instrument just becomes a mass of glorious color. Let's see, flights of sweeping color. Then the subject descends. Lots of low rumblings. I mean, he uses the entire voice capability and mood capability of the instrument. Again, that's why
Yeah.
I asked you earlier about how it falls under the fingers. Lots of notes I have in my thing. Lots of notes. Big, powerful sounds. The last
Mm-hmm.
bit almost sounds like I almost thought I heard da 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 dum, but I must be out of my mind. Can you help me out of that one? You know what I'm saying? At the very last notes, there's almost a figure, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's subconscious or not, but to me, because remember I was doing stream of consciousness, I hear da 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 dum, something at the end. Go.
Yes, yeah. So he does have kind of a motive like that rhythmically, um, with a C to an A. So it's a little bit, yeah. It could be like Beethoven, or Rachmaninoff usually uses some kind of
Good.
distinct motive at the end of his pieces.
I just
So
wondered if there was anything kind of deliberate. That's why I took the grave chance of venturing the thought.
Yeah, no, no, that's great. I mean, I don't know, like Rachmaninoff always has kind of the same rhythmic
Yep.
pattern or very similar.
Yep.
With Vine, it could be this motive, but I've noticed in his other piano sonatas, he does have kind of a general, I wouldn't say formula, but like his third sonata also features kind of a glissando and then
Oh,
this motive at the end. So it's a little bit similar,
kind
the
of
coda.
stylistically, he's essentially saying, "Remember me." You know what I mean about how composers might maybe. I mean, it could be.
Yeah,
Yeah, I understand
yeah,
what you mean. Um, the Anne Landa Preludes. I want to talk about just a little bit. 12 Preludes from 2006. Anne Landa was one of his teachers, as I understand. Have I got that
sure,
correct?
really,
And if not a teacher, she supported young pianists a lot. I'm not quite
yes,
sure how that worked.
yeah,
Do you have any?
exactly. Very well beloved in the country.
Uh-huh. And so these are one of the first one short story. That's the one I got lost in. I mean, I think it's about 5 minutes or something, and it seemed like I had just seen her listen to a whole tone poem or something. It's just amazing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's amazing how he creates completely separate worlds in each one of these. Um, yeah, they're just, I find them really stunning pieces of music, every one of them.
Filigree, fast, flighty, fun, hard, beautifully articulated by yourself, may I say, and this is not easy. Articulation is so important, as you very well know. Thumper, and you mentioned that Thumper was kind of amusing. It is. It wasn't the amusing that I was kind of expecting. Thumper, the big thumper of a rabbit, and yet it is. I mean, it's playful. It's a interesting
Exactly,
piece, yeah.
exactly.
And then again with these little flourishes, these kind of Mannheim rockets up and down of flourishing piano
Yeah,
stuff. Go ahead.
exactly. No, and actually that particular prelude reminds me a little bit of kind of the pianistic writing you find with Prokofiev.
Mm.
Um, not, I mean, it's a little bit lighter. It has more humor to it, but just the way it feels at the instrument, with all these kind of block chords. He plays with the rhythm a lot.
Yeah.
That to me is a little bit influenced by Prokofiev.
Yeah, I mean, what came to mind was bum 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 bum
Yeah.
bum 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 bum, and what I mean by that is not the tune, but the rhythm, just that thumper rhythm, if you will.
Hmm.
It's kind of crazy. Uh, Ever after ever,
Hmm.
speak to me while I wipe, wipe the tears from my eyes. It's called Lovely from the Get-Go, a caress pianistically. Um, this composer sucks the listener in right away.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love. Um, you can immediately within the first measure of each one of these get a very distinct
Mm.
emotion that he's creating. It's so beautiful what he does.
And that's exactly the craft, giving us
Hmm.
these different emotions and moods. 2/5, fast, light, virtuosic, and so on. I don't. This 2-3 meter thing is
Right.
kind of fun.
Hmm.
Milk for Swami Lee. I didn't look up who Swami Lee was, but speaking of an totally contrasting uh, prelude, that number 6 is just out of Mars or something. It's just
Yeah,
completely different.
right. He completely creates this different sound world. It's again, it's a little bit like maybe WC because of the registral contrast and kind of the open fifths and sixth that he uses throughout it. It's got this very mysterious quality to it, which to me is also kind of a defining characteristic of Vine's piano music. This mysterious quality that's
Mm.
very kind of sustained at the same time. Um,
And it's present. You're quite right. There is mystery in his motifs, if that is anywhere close to what I'm trying to say, in his music that I hear throughout. But this is really almost magical realism. I mean,
mhm,
Swami, indeed. This little prelude is
mhm.
so utterly and takes us so utterly and completely to an entirely different world. It's just
Right.
incredible from a compositional point of view about the magic of this guy's mind. Divertissement,
Mhm.
kind of. I have a note here that says kind of retro. Lots of fun and rhythmic games and glitters. Very hard.
That one is, I would say that's maybe the hardest one technically.
Hmm.
It's good because musicians. So
Ah,
it's definitely
it's I use the word fulsome
mm,
when you describe being. I mean, it's all it
it's all over the place.
occupies the whole keyboard. It's great.
Yeah.
Sweet sour. I love that prelude. Gossamer again, mystical chords. I found anyway. It repeats. Sequences are repeated, so there's a structure and a cohesion and a narrative and so on. Want to say anything about Sweet Sour? What I could come out with? And it kind of drifts away into sort of an almost unanswered question. And I find sweet and sour more sour, really, in our experience than
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, well, exactly. But the idea is that you've got this constant kind of friction happening. Literally white keys against black keys, and it's so
Mm.
beautiful. Kind of those all these colors meshing together. Um, Again, it's one of those preludes that brings out just this very kind of French sounding
Mm.
world, I would say. Um, and it's so beautiful to kind of play around with all the different colors you can create in just a chord. So a
Yeah.
lot of possibilities,
And
imagination.
also the way he will occasionally resolve things for a moment in pure tonality, if you will. Not that
Hmm.
these are atonal pieces at all. They're very accessible, but you know what I mean? There'll just be this. I'm seeing something about a kind of chorale chord.
Right.
I'm still in number 8 of the preludes, and then it drifts off. But just that he's unafraid to have a moment of rest in a tonality that's really not particularly part
Hmm.
of the piece. I don't I didn't explain it very well, but I love that he will meld us into a moment of beautiful tonality
And resolve.
and
Yeah.
resolve things. Tarantella. What I see is what I have written down is low register festerings, rapid passages, quite a mood, crazy colors. He's a
Hmm.
master of color on the
Yeah.
piano. It's incredible. Frenetic, fun, crazy. Did you recover?
Barely. Yes. That's another really fun one. It's just um,
And all
I
over
love.
the keyboard again, all over the
Yeah,
keyboard.
exactly. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun to play.
And then romance. I'm glad we're talking about these because romance, for example, just again, we are prepared by the title alone. But
Right.
I'm in my ear, it was late romantic, early 20th century gorgeousness, uh, thick sonorities. In
Hmm.
that, as you said before, in that kind of French manner of thick, beautiful, gloriously thick sonorities, rich pianistic color. Uh, Go ahead.
That's one of my favorite ones to play because I mean I'm a sucker for any kind of romantic music. I love Chopin, Schumann, Brahms. So um, again, you can hear all these influences
Mm.
from romantic piano music on Carl Vine with pieces like
Mhm.
this, preludes like this.
And yet he's not, I want to highlight this, and yet in no way does he compromise his own being. He's not
Yeah, absolutely
trying, but it's a
right.
romance, but it's Vine's romance, if you will, in with some
Not
French. Yeah, go ahead, please.
right. Never I never find his music to be cliche in any way. It's so
That's,
authentic, it's so sincere, but like we've been talking about, it's very accessible at the same time. You can immediately appreciate the beauty of it.
and in my notes I have I say Vine has some kind of powerful intuition about humans and how to move them. And
Hmm.
if you got that
Absolutely.
magic, if you've got that magic, you're a master. And again, these pedal echoes and pauses throughout the CD, even that his use of a device of of pause, a little bit of silence. It's just all mesmerizing. Musical image, just a fragment of something gone from earlier. I mean, he's just full of mysteries and magical suggestions and so on. Okay, then the Fugetta get
Mm.
started. And I thought to myself, great, he's going to give us a lovely, a little. He's going to show us that he knows how to write a proper fugata. It starts out in classical Baroque opening, and then things start to,
Unravel, so to speak.
so to speak, but not in a bad way.
No, no,
It's
it's
so clever, really.
yeah, it's amazing kind of the directions he goes and the rhythmic aspect of it, it's very unexpected all of a sudden.
Now you remember, I stick my neck out a little bit when I speak, use some of my little notes because again it's pure, you know, I listen, my hands move, and then later I try to figure it out. But this I thought was for me that Fugata and the way it develops is kind of like a very clear crack on your windshield. That's the
Yes.
and then
All
it begins to fracture and spread. There's no controlling it. It's not that it's out of control. It's just that there's an inevitability to this huge piece that it becomes. How'd that go? Go.
yeah, that's a good explanation. Wow.
Okay, and cooking on its own energy. And when a composer has knows how to use rhythm in an energetic and appealing way, if you will, for an audience, he's got us, you know. And then the chorale. I'll shut up now. You tell me. The chorale,
Well,
this last prelude.
this is probably my favorite prelude just because it's just so, I would say, like transcendent. It's obviously inspired by Bach in some way and tonal, yes, but it's just so, it represents everything I love about Vine's music. It's the sincerity of his expression, his musicianship. Um, and yeah, I love ending, especially playing these as a set. I find ending it with this chorale is just so poignant, and audiences love it.
And here's what grabbed me about that chorale. You know, Yankees, Americans talk about Copeland, the American sound, well, the Great Plains, you know, and it's all so true and so hard to describe. Somehow this chorale prelude is convinces me Vine is has found the Australian uh, plains or something. There's something that
Oh, yeah.
do you know what I mean? Back to in other words, it's almost American and it ain't. It's something. It's Australian. It's I don't know, but beautiful,
I
beautiful.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I've actually spoken to some musicians who feel exactly that with Vine's piano music in particular, very similar to Copeland in that it has this kind of expansiveness to it, that has maybe kind of a folk element in some
Mm-hmm.
way, that makes Copeland's music so successful. I definitely understand what you're saying because I find that too. You get this maybe timelessness, I would describe
There's
it
some. I
as.
mean, it's I somewhere up here I used the word sad and what I meant by that I don't know if I'll use it or not, but is and what I mean about grabbing the heart of the Australian temperament.
Mm.
This is a people of penal colony. You know what I mean? There's got to be some kind of 300-year-old sad. Do you understand
Yes.
what I mean? Because they were all shipped. They weren't. They didn't go there to say, "Hey, I'm going to start have a farm and sheep." No, they were sent there, and then and it's like fend for yourselves. Like I mean, I'm greatly exaggerating Australian history, I'm sure, but you know what I mean. There's
There's a lot you can hear in the background
okay.
of it. Yeah.
Okay, so as though the preludes didn't exhaust us intellectually, this first sonata from 1990, it's so fascinating. I don't know even where to begin. Why don't you give us and it's in two movements. Are they separated by a pause? I mean on the CD, but do you move immediately into the leggero e legato
I would
from the
say
first?
it is somewhat attacca,
Hmm.
but I mean, they are separate movements. Um, and
Just
performance,
curious. Yeah, I was just
yeah,
curious about it.
I think it works really well to end the first movement and kind of just go into the second movement organically, like it's coming out of the chords from the first movement. The texture is very, very different in the second movement, very intricate. So yeah, it's two movements. It features a lot, especially in the first movement, a lot of these open fifths in the bass. So it gives it, like we were just talking about, the expansiveness, sustained quality throughout, which this type of writing, which is maybe kind of chorale as well, like the last of the preludes, um, he interjects this with like very kind of like bursts of energy, a lot of notes in the first movement. And I think this is also why people love the first sonata so much um, is the way that he gains momentum. It's so effective. And I think you really hear that particularly in the first movement. He'll come to these climaxes that are just so, they're just so natural, and they don't, beat you over the head at the same time. But he's a master at driving energy, I
And
would
then he'll
say.
move into an entirely different subject or a derivative subject, and it all makes perfect sense. In other words, his sequencing. I don't know if that's quite the right word. His
Yeah.
sequencing in terms of I'm thinking of dance sequences. You know, one long piece that may have 7 sequences of dance movement. His musical sequences move one to the other with such high intelligence, even despite how contrasting they are. I mean, this is
Yeah.
great piano writing. And it's such a vast canvas of piano color. I mean, I hear piano music all the time, but something grabbed me on this fabulous CD of yours. I'm going to put this up at Performing Arts Review, and we'll do the whole thing. I'll write the review and all that one of these years. But the world has come to such a stop. Um,
Yeah.
I guess my point is just what a great composer of piano music he is, and what a magician of imagery, sequences, imageries, narrations that move one to the other, even as contrasting as they are, making perfect sense. That's art. I mean, that's craft, real craft. Um, Gigantic compositional effort I see here. I'm looking at the second movement of the Leggero e Legato. Um, just huge. It's a wonderful narrative piece. Go ahead, talk to me about it a little bit. The second movement.
Yeah. So it features very fast, in unison, 16th note. I guess you could call them, well, maybe some kind of motivic material that repeats, like an ostinato pattern. And again, he goes through these waves of, different dynamics, for instance.
Yeah.
So he starts very softly, he moves more, driving the energy to louder with
Yes.
this driving rhythmic pattern. So it creates this stunning effect. I'd say. Um,
And
it
speaking of everything you just mentioned too, my note here says this is bring the house down stuff. This material.
exactly.
This is bring the house stuff down. It's stunning. It's like this thing is like a freight train,
Mhm.
roaring, snorting, faster, faster. The energy is stunning. The pianist is all over the keyboard. It's magnificent.
I agree. Yeah, it's really amazing writing. There's a reason people love this piece so much.
And the 5 bagatelles we can just have a look at again. Again, they're wonderful. I loved Trinity. Again, there's another little Leggiero e Legato, impressive writing, fast, fidgety. How did when you play these 5 bagatelles? How this is from 1994, so earlier.
Mhm.
How does it all fit together? I mean, how does it all work in terms of how an audience responds to these 5 bagatelles?
The
Can you?
five bells. They're a little bit more, mm, maybe a little bit more kind of mysterious than the preludes.
Yes, yeah.
First of all, they don't really have titles like, you know, you can picture something happening,
Yeah.
um, but they definitely have very distinct characters. So in that sense, they are very much like the preludes. But I find that the bagatelles are maybe a little bit less, I don't know if accessible is the word, but they might be a little bit harder to instantly grab onto. Um, but that said, I love kind of the mystery he creates throughout them, especially in the first bagatelle. It does have kind of a darkness to it. Um, and for instance, one of them is very much influenced by jazz, so that one's
Hmm.
really fun. Um,
And again, never derivative. There are
right.
there, and by the way, throughout the CD, I hear. Correct me if I missed the mark, but yeah, there are. He has a jazz
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic that
Uh,
he employs very delicately, very carefully. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
some of these jazz rhythms, and then sometimes for fun as well. So I mean that it's there. He's just a master of all this good stuff. Yeah.
I just think he's a phenomenal musician.
And I have
And
this note that says mysterious doubting chords.
yes, Well,
whatever that means.
he does use a lot of tritones in general
Mm.
in his piano music. So I think he's able to use tritones. He creates very different colors though, depending on the context. So I think he does that really beautifully. For instance, in the first of the bagatelles, just constant tritones everywhere, but it gives it that mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wind it. We're going to kind of backtrack in a bit, but I want to talk about Toccatissimo
Mm-hmm.
because from 2011, just
Mm-hmm.
tell me about preparing Toccatissimo, please, because it's like,
Yeah, it's really an amazing
it's
piece.
thrilling, absolutely thrilling, great performance. Thank you,
Oh,
thank you, fabulous. But anyway, tell us about putting that one together.
yeah, it was difficult. It is very much kind of like a glorified etude,
Hmm.
in the sense that well, obviously it's very fast. It's toccatissimo. It's very brilliant. You really have to have quite a lot of dexterity to play it well and be very clear with all the notes because there's so many notes in this piece that happen very quickly. And okay, so that's very difficult technically. But the other difficult thing about it is memorizing the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do that for the Sydney competition in 2016, and that was very difficult to do because, like I mentioned, a lot of his piano music features ostinato patterns. So the toccatissimo is basically the whole time just different ostinato patterns that change slightly almost every one of the patterns. The notes are changing, so it was very difficult to memorize. But I think kind of like the first sonata with the concept of like momentum, he really is a master at building the energy to the very end of the toccatissimo.
Yeah.
So it's fun to play.
It's a and it's obviously another bring the house down kind of
Yes.
piece. And when you mentioned about just a moment ago about how difficult it was the Toccatissimo to memorize because of these repetitive passages that nevertheless are tweaked just a tiny
Yeah.
bit harmonically, I
Constantly
guess, or chord
changing.
structure. And that's what is so cool about the whole CD, because this is also maybe a little tiny bit of a signature, or just that he's just so damn good as a composer. But I love being repeated on several occasions, being thrown off just teensy weensy tiniest little bit, not as in thrown off and made dizzy, but just like, oh, what did he just do there? What was that subtle little change of the chord? That's just magical. And
Yes.
and so you say the Toccatissimo, aside from its flying by at 1,000 miles an hour, it's the tough part was that were these subtle, tiny little changes that nevertheless also have to be heard and
Right.
understood in some sub basement way by an audience. You know what I mean? This is
Right.
essential. Yeah.
Actually, well, I wanted to share just a really
Sure.
brief story
Yeah.
about this because, uh, since I've been playing this piece since 2016, I've performed it several times in different settings and that kind of thing. So I found it really interesting that I performed it, I would say, in spring of 2018. I live in Florida, so I was doing a recital at one point in the state, and there are a fair amount of retired folk who live here, and this particular audience I was playing for was just that. And usually you could say retired audiences like the more traditional repertoire. It's a little bit harder to kind of throw in 20th century, 21st century composers. I played a program of Schubert, Schumann, Chopin, and Vine. Without fail, everybody said they loved the Vine the most. So I thought that was really interesting. That would be kind of the hardest audience to kind of sell this to, but
Yeah.
it's just a testament to his power.
And those of us who know what we're doing. Hello, I hope I'm I hope I'm speaking accurately for myself. Uh, but the interest is so keen for all
Yeah.
those reasons we just described. He's such an interesting composer and does so many interesting things. But he also makes music that is so incredibly accessible,
Hmm.
even to us, if you get my
Right.
drift. And that was my
Yeah.
impression from almost note one of this CD. It's like damn, he got me right there from about the first few notes, and then I was intrigued and fascinated, and throughout in a very very positive manner. So you have just described a very conservative, elderly audience, uh,
Hmm.
if I may say so. I hope without offending anybody, uh, finding the truth and fun and accessibility of
Right.
fine in that toccatissimo, and also just the brilliance of the piece. Pianist Lindsay Garritson, many, many thanks. I think we've been working at this for about 7 months or something.
Yeah.
I think our first kind of connection was about that long ago. How time flies, and there's still more nightmare ahead. I'm sorry to say, but your 2019 independent CD release, and it's beautifully packaged. I mean, everything I'm looking at it right now, everything, including, by the way, it just occurred to me, I'm going to get myself in deep trouble, I'm sure, but including the powerful photographs of yourself.
Oh,
And what I
thank you.
mean by that is, how do I keep from getting in trouble? Um,
That's fine.
what I mean by that is, this is a powerful woman looking back at me, not a sex object. Okay,
Thank you.
how'd I do? And
No,
that's
that's
very, very important because, again, women are still stuck. I hear it all the time in this thing where they have to wear stilettos, and it's crazy. Maybe another 100 years, but what I see here is a cover design that's not only beautifully put together. So congrats to just the design, but
thank
the
you.
photographs are the two that are the three, well, two I guess, that are on this CD are powerful female images, and I hope that you understand that's a
Yes, no, I
powerful
appreciate that.
compliment from me for you. So it's
Thank
marvelous, and once we get through this nightmare and you start to get back out on the streets, so to say, playing. I'm sure you do not look as old as I look, so I'm sure you have a long career ahead of you, and your playing is just superb. And to be a master, to master this kind of repertoire with such intelligence is fabulous. So, aphorisms, the piano music of Carl Vine. Everyone who is not quite who is a pianist or looking for piano repertoire, who does not quite clear about Carl Vine, please have a look. This is very very important repertoire for the piano. Aphorism, pithy indeed, observations, beautiful. Two sonatas, five bagatelles, 12 preludes, and an incredible toccatissimo. You can't go wrong. Lindsay, thanks very much. Great
Thank you
pleasure.
for.
Okay, bye bye.
Okay.